On Good Shepherd Sunday, it's wonderful to go back to our Jewish roots, our Jewish forebears. Psalm 23 that Kelsey sang so beautifully is the most popular, the most famous of the 150 Psalms. And you can see that for the Jewish people, they are the sheep and God is the shepherd. And when we come to the Christian scriptures, the risen Christ now as the Son of God, he too is the good shepherd, and we are the flock, we are the sheep. I do recommend to you this book, A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23 by Philip Keller. Philip Keller, outstanding, a very short book, but so much insight into how the shepherd takes care of us, his sheep. And you know, when our Jewish forebears heard John the Baptist say, "Look, the Lamb of God," they knew right away that the Lamb of God would be the Lamb of sacrifice. And I want to show you this Lamb of sacrifice. Joe and Denise Blair from Barnstead came and gave this to me yesterday. And their children, Jacob, their son, and Ava, our altar server, Ava Blair. But this is from a cherry tree on their property, and Joe carved the Lamb of God, the Lamb of sacrifice. How beautiful. So I'm going to put that right on the altar for you, Denise and Joe. If I can make a broad statement, the contrast between being people of faith and being secular people. And we live in a secular society. And I would say this, in many good things, many good people, I'm not putting anybody down, but in a secular society, basically, we make the decisions. And if there is a God, he certainly isn't in the conversation and is not in the decision making. We make our own decisions. It's my life, and will run my own life, and I will decide. So there's a general statement. Whereas in a contrast to a life without God, secular life, would be being sheep with God as our shepherd, God the Father, Christ, the risen Christ as our shepherd. We're part of his flock, and there is this intimate dialogue, this constant conversation going on all the time. And it's beautiful. It really is beautiful that God is not only part of the conversation, God is part of the decision making. Notice in the Gospel of John that Deacon Rick just proclaimed, it says that the Good Shepherd calls us by name. He knows each of us. He knows you. He knows your name. He calls you by name. Talk about intimacy. And he also says that we recognize his voice. We recognize the voice of the shepherd. And when we hear another voice, it just doesn't sound right. So when you hear a statement, it just doesn't sound like the Good Shepherd. Then you kind of know. So you know what voice to follow, what voice to avoid. But this constant dialogue. In the Hebrew scriptures, God holds us in the palm of his hands. He calls us by name. We are precious to him. We are his flock. And then in the Christian scriptures, the Good Shepherd gives his life for us. We have a shepherd who dies for us. We can't have a shepherd who loves us any more than that. So we're really privileged. It's a gift. It's a gift, the gift of faith. Ask for it. Ask for the gift to believe. Now, did you know that today, the 3rd of May, is the feast of the 2 apostles, Philip and James? And the book I just mentioned, The Shepherd Looks at the Sheep, and looks at Psalm 23. The author is Philip Keller. Philip. So this is our friend. This is Philip the sheep on the feast of St. Philip. And I must say, he really has quite a wardrobe. He has all the colors of the 4 liturgical colors, except we're waiting for Pentecost, the red. And he really has, he looks just marvelous, marvelous here. But I leave him in the sanctuary because when you look at Philip, the sheep, you're looking at yourself. We're all sheep, just like Philip. We're part of the flock. And so Christ, the Good Shepherd, is looking after us. And we're in constant dialogue with him. And we can be safe in his care. We have a shepherd who calls us by name and loves us and gave his life for us. There's nothing that he won't do for us. So we have so much to learn from our friend Philip. Now, baby sheep, little sheep, I mean, they're cute, they're cuddly, aren't they nice? And the beautiful wool that we get wool blankets and clothing from, but they're just terrific to hold. But there's something we got to learn about that. I've always wondered, why didn't God use another analogy? Like, for example, we are his stallions. We are his thoroughbreds. We are his Clydesdales. Did I say that right? Clydesdale, yeah. And he doesn't. He says, no, you're my sheep. Well, if you talk to people who care for sheep, they're the wonderful little guy, but they're very weak. They're weak. They're weak animals. They're not strong. And they cannot defend themselves. They cannot defend themselves. They need the shepherd to survive. The wild animals, the wolves, will devour them without the care of their shepherd. You see how opposite that is of secular thinking? Secular thinking says we don't need God, but in faith, we have an absolute need. An absolute need. We can't survive without the shepherd. We'll get killed. So we're weak. We can't defend ourselves. And you know, they can't even run. They don't have any speed. They can't even run away. And they're clumsy. I hate to tell you this, but we're clumsy. You know, they fall down. We fall down. Well, when we fall, we call it sin. So the sheep, they fall a lot. And the shepherd, you know, the staff has a hook on it, on the end of it. And part of the reason is that when we fall down and can't get up, we can't get up, we're so clumsy, the shepherd has to pull us up with his staff, see? So all of these things about us, right? Now, I don't want Philip to hear this, but we're not too bright. Yeah, the sheep are not, we're not dolphins. You know, they say the dolphins are the brightest of the other animals, but we're not dolphins, we're sheep. And so we do stupid things. Have you ever really sinned? And after you sin, you say, gosh, why did I do that? Why did I do that? That was dumb. Well, we're not dolphins, folks. We're sheep. And so we do stupid things. When you fall, we call that sin, or wander away. when we wander, when we leave the shepherd, when we leave the flock, we go off by ourselves, like we don't need the shepherd, where we can do it on our own. We get lost. We get lost in sin. We say all of those words describe. And so what can happen is, it's in the scriptures as well, a sheep, let's say Philip wanders off. And I go over to Deacon Rick and I say, oh, Deacon Rick, Philip got lost. I don't know where he is. So would you keep an eye on the rest of the flock, keep the wolves away? I'm going to go find him. And so the good shepherd goes out and he finally finds the lost sheep. And it tells us, instead of yelling at him or kicking him or punishing him, picks him up in jubilation and carries him home. That's what the good shepherd is like. He wants us home. He wants us back in the flock, okay? And so we're in constant dialogue with him. I think it's so important to know, the end of the gospel, it says that I want you to have life and have it in abundance. The abundant life is not the secular life when we're on our own. The abundant life is to be part of the flock and to have God as the good shepherd, to have the risen Christ as the good shepherd, and to be in constant dialogue with him. You know, I'm going to use a clerical example of the importance of being in dialogue with the shepherd, talking. We call it prayer. But I knew a priest once who wanted this particular parish. It was the parish of his dreams. If I could only be pastor of that parish. He got it. And it was like the Titanic. It was a disaster. He got exactly what he wanted and was miserable. He couldn't wait to get out of there. Have you ever done that? You ever got what you wanted and then were miserable? Well, a better model would be to go to the shepherd, and you can tell him what you want, but then say, now, you're the good shepherd. I'm the sheep. What do you want? What do you want from me? Where do you need me? How can I help you? That's a different question. That's a different question. Much healthier. Much healthier. Let God tell us what he wants for us. And the other thing is that, you know, life is not about us. It's not. We're part of the flock. We're part of salvation history. We actually share the life of God. We share the life of Christ. Life is about God. It's not about us. It really isn't. And so when we think we can call the shots and be in control, we're not in control. Ultimately, we're not in control. This was years ago when I was first ordained, and I always played golf since I was in the 6th or 7th grade. But anyway, I had a parishioner come and say, you know, Father, there's no benefit in golf. It's not vigorous exercise. You're really not doing your heart any good just stopping and starting and swinging. You've got to start jogging. And now my older brother, Dick, he lives in California. He jogs every day, and he loves it, and he's very healthy. I'm all for it, for him. But this parishioner, you know, so he really was pushing me. And finally, he gave me a book by Jim Fixx, the complete book on running. And he got it autographed. It was an autographed copy of Jim Fixx's book on running. Well, in 1984, in July, in neighboring Vermont, Jim Fixx went out for a jog. He was vacationing. He never came back. God rest his soul. 52 years old. 52, and I'm not saying we have to go to our doctor, we have to eat properly, we have to exercise, all of those things. But ultimately, folks, we're not in control. And if we don't know that right now, in the middle of this pandemic, that human life is fragile. that life on this planet is fragile, and that we are not calling all the shots, and we can't fix everything, and we just can't make it all happen. That we're not the creator. We're not the shepherd. We're the creatures. We're the sheep. It's very humbling, very, very humbling to know our place, and that life is not about us. It's not about us. We're part of God's life. We're part of salvation history. I always like to say, if Abraham Lincoln's mother had done nothing else but give us Abraham Lincoln, her life was worthwhile. She played her part. She gave us Abraham Lincoln. So nobody's life is insignificant or unimportant. We all are part of a much bigger story. I mean, imagine if eternity was just about ourselves, how boring that would be. Boring. But we're part of this larger story, God's story, salvation history. We all have our part to play. All right, so Philip, you're not a dolphin, huh? You're not strong, you're not fast, you're not all that bright, but you're in the flock. You've got the shepherd who cares about you, protecting you. You've got nothing to worry about. Why? Because we're in the flock now, and we will be with the shepherd forever. That's good news. That's resurrection and life. You're the best dressed sheep that I know.